morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice Radio. So today, I'm going to be showing you a very fun old deck with Alakazam and Cleffa. Now, quick shout out to the lovely Legally Sarcastic over on Twitter. He is one of the supporters of this channel over at patreon.com/PTCGRadio. And if you ever do want to support the channel, that is the best place to do so. And he is on the highest tier, which means once a month he gets to demand I make a video. And this month he said, Wassy, I'd like a video about this old deck. So I said, cool. And I went and did some research. And now we're rolling. The main attacker in this deck is Dark Alakazam. Now this is, of course, a very interesting card because Dark Alakazam evolves from Dark Kadabra. And Dark Kadabra seemed to be themed on Uri Geller. And let's just say we don't have Kadabra cards anymore and leave it at that. So a nice little historical note there. But what does Dark Alakazam actually do? Well, Dark Alakazam has an attack for 2 psychic, 1 colorless energy, 30 damage, and you may switch to the bench. And that's what we're focusing on here. Now, this is from the old Team Rocket set, right? This is an old card. I know that 2 psychic and a colorless energy, 30 damage, and switch to the bench doesn't sound good, but I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, back then it was actually quite nice indeed. Now, there was a second attack on here. It just wasn't particularly impressive. 40 damage, don't apply weakness and resistance. You could use it, but it wasn't really what we were going for here. Okay, cool, I suppose. But as with all of these cards we've looked at in the past, when you switch to the bench, you need something to put up in its place. Oh, look, it's Cleffa. And we like Cleffa. Cleffa here's got 30 HP, which is very low, but it has free retreat. And when you're in a hit and run deck like this, it's really important to have free retreat. You attack with Dark Alakazam, you flick to the bench, you put Cleffa up, but then you need to retreat, and you've got free retreat. All right, fine, I suppose. But what's the point of Cleffa here? Well, first of all, for 1 colorless energy, eek, shuffle your hand into your deck, draw 7 cards. Fun little thing which someone pointed out to me a while ago. There have been a bunch of different Cleffas with the eek attack, and it always has the same number of E's as cards that you draw after shuffling your hand into your deck. How much fun is that? So that's kind of nice to get yourself set up. But far more importantly, when Cleffa is in the active and your opponent tries to attack, they flip a coin. And if tails, that attack fails. Yeah. This is why it's a blocker. Because let's face it right, ladies and gentlemen, this has 30 HP. 30 HP is not good for blocking, but your opponent can only attack every other turn, which actually makes this Cleffa really, really fun. So you attack with Dark Alakazam, you switch into Cleffa. There is one other important card that we really need in this deck, and it's Dark Vileplume. You see, Dark Vileplume has got a Pokemon power, what would now be an ability. No trainer cards can be played. Neither player can play any trainer cards while Dark Vileplume is out. And the thing to remember here is that this was back when everything was a trainer. There's no stadiums, items, all of that. Everything here was a trainer. So this turned off a lot. And that's something else that needs to be pointed out here. Because throughout the Pokemon trading card game history, we've had a bunch of cards that force you to switch your active Pokemon. Like, for instance, Pokemon Catcher, which was around when these cards were around. Yeah, that's a little bit of a problem, ladies and gentlemen, because that can then get Cleffa out the active and you can attack whatever you bring up. But Dark Vileplume turned it off. Similarly, we should be looking at the attack cost for Dark Alakazam and going, wow, we got these energy removal cards. So how do you ever get the energy on? But Dark Vileplume turns them off. And at this stage, I should mention Pokemon Breeder. Pokemon Breeder, a very, very important card because, well, it did back then what Rare Candy does now. You just get to evolve straight up into a Stage 2, and that's pretty gosh darned important. And that's largely the deck, except I said how Cleffa was annoying. Yeah, Cleffa actually gets a lot more annoying because we had Focus Band. And if the Pokemon to which Focus Band is attached would be knocked out by an opponent's attack, flip a coin. If heads, that Pokemon is not knocked out and its HP becomes 10 instead, then you discard the Focus Band. So your opponent has to flip a coin to attack. And if they flip heads, they're probably going to KO because Cleffa's got 30 HP. But then, of course, that doesn't really matter because then they've got to flip another heads for Focus Band. Or I suppose it's not really them flipping a heads, it's you flipping a tails. But the same deal. It's still a 50-50 chance that actually this all goes terribly wrong for your opponent. It's really hard to knock out a Cleffa when you've got to flip heads and then your opponent's got to flip a tails just to actually get this working. Doable, don't get me wrong, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely doable, but certainly not particularly easy at all. So yeah, this was annoying. So then, alright, it is a little bit expensive in terms of an attack, and you are a little bit vulnerable in terms of you're not doing enough damage and it takes free energy, but Dark Vileplume saving you. Now there is one other Pokemon which was absolutely key to this deck, and it's Donphan! How cool is that? Donphan, my boy Donphan, back in the day. And Donphan, for free fighting energy, 50 damage, and then your opponent switches to the bench, and you switch to the bench. So again, it's another way of doing a bit of damage and switching to the bench. Donphan is a Stage 1, not a Stage 2, which is good. And Donphan does 50 damage rather than 30, which is good. And Donphan hits a different weakness, which is good. But it forces your opponent to switch, which you might not want to. And it's a different energy cost. So essentially what you do here is you play some Donphan and some Dark Alakazam. And then you play some Psychic, some Fighting Energy. And then you play Rainbow. And you're off. Incidentally, you could play Grass Energy with this deck as well, and then actually be attacking with Dark Vileplume, which did 30 damage for each heads you could flip from free coins. Problem with this was that you then wouldn't be switching to the bench, so good in an emergency or against a Pokemon that's weak to grass. You could also play around with Elekid, and a couple people did put a couple of Elekid into their decks. Elekid is very, very much like the Tyrogue that we're going to be getting in Unbroken Bonds, in that you can flip a coin, and then if heads, you do some damage, but your turn ends whether you flip heads or not. But you can use it from the bench, and if it's in the active, your opponent has to flip to attack, and it's got free retreat, so it largely does the same thing that Cleffa does. It's not exactly the same as Cleffa, because Cleffa does give you that great draw power, but it's certainly not a million miles away. Now, that's the deck as a whole, but we do need to have a quick look at a few trainer cards before we get out of here. We had Professor Elm back then. Shove your hand into your deck, draw 7 cards. It's Cleffa! It's literally Cleffa! Now, the downside was you couldn't play any more trainer cards that turn, but you could still play energy, you could still evolve Pokemon. It was a good draw card back then. We had The Boss's Way, that let you search for an evolution card with Dark in its name and put it into your hand, which was quite nice. And of course, that was very important because you had Dark Vileplume and Dark Alakazam, and they were pretty important to the deck. Remember, back then, trainer cards could just be played as and when. There was no supporters or any of that. We had Rocket's Hideout, which was a lovely little stadium here that said that each Pokemon with Dark or Rockets in its name gets plus 20 HP. Again, with Cleffa, it was kind of irrelevant because you'd have the Focus Band, and also your opponent had to flip heads to attack even to get to the Focus Band, and then your Dark Vileplume and Dark Alakazam could take advantage of this, which was pretty cool. We had Bill back then. Bill let you draw cards. Bill's really good. We had Pokemon Trader, which swapped a basic or evolution card in your hand for a basic or evolution card from your deck. Pretty gosh darn important just in terms of getting the right Pokemon out. And we had Chaos Gym, which was the other stadium that we played. And essentially, whenever a player played a trainer card other than a stadium, they flipped a coin. If heads, it works. If tails, the player can't play that card. And if the card isn't put into play, the player's opponent may use that card instead. If he or she does everything required in order to play that card, either way it goes to its owner's discard pile. So you stop your opponent playing trainer cards, while also potentially using them instead of your opponent using them, which if you think about it, it's kind of funny. This was a fun deck. It was an annoying deck. It was a deck that used free energy attachments to attack, back when energy removal cards were still in the format, which is a bit dumb. But the combination of Dark Vileplume and Baby Pokemon meant that your opponent had a really, really hard time ever attacking you, and then you'd hit and run to victory. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, any deck that plays a Donphan is going to be A-OK in my book. Thank you to the lovely Legally Sarcastic for supporting over on Patreon and being a generally lovely man. Thank you to all you lovely ladies and gentlemen for watching this. And of course, let me know what you think about this deck in the comment section. Go nuts! But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would you? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at The Wassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus pods, and maybe even force me to make a video like the lovely chap did, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about other games. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.